Welcome everybody to my podcast, Big Little Small Talk. I'm Megan O'Hara-Sullivan and I love to talk, but I also love to listen. If you're new here, welcome. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoy the episode. Hello listeners, you're with me, Megan O'Hara-Sullivan. We're on Big Little Small Talk and we're today here interviewing a novelist and her name is Alison or Ali Trimper. Welcome to Big Little Small Talk, Ali.
Thank you very much, Megan.
Now, I'm going to start off because in my other life, I'm an optometrist and I love your glasses. They're very unusual. Tell me about those glasses.
These glasses, I've had so many comments when I went to the optician and I needed new glasses and I said, I think I need new frames. And these were just new in the shop and the girls were just dying to sell them to someone and I was just dying to have them. And I've had so many positive comments. It's just been blissful and I do love them.
So do you think that they express your creativity?
No, I hope that they make me look a little less severe than the last glasses did. I hope they make me look a little more friendly because my last frames were quite school marmish.
Well, that brings me to my next point because besides being a novelist, you are not a mum, but a school teacher, yes? So tell me about your career. You didn't do teaching straight away when you left school,
Absolutely. No, I did nothing of note. I did a lot of different jobs and wound up in Darwin where I met my husband, married him, had children. We moved to Bangkok, which was a very interesting move, but it proved fatal for our marriage. Then I moved to Adelaide and met my current partner. And we've been to the mid-north coast where we were farming tea trees and Murray grey cattle. And as if I wasn't busy enough, because I was also working as a teacher aide and my 3 sons were in high school, my husband said, well, if you want to be a teacher. So I began my studies externally at University of New England and finished my degree as a primary school teacher.
Okay, I want to go back to all of that in a minute, but can we talk about Thailand? What were you doing in Thailand? What were you and
My
your then
husband he worked at the Australian Embassy. He was an officer with the Australian Embassy. I mean, any embassy people lived a very sheltered life over there. And it was a beautiful country. Despite there being a lot of unrest at the time, I never once felt threatened or endangered. The Thai people are very, very gentle, beautiful people. They loved my children to the extent that they never even asked permission when they took them away. So I was frequently losing my children, which was a little bit traumatic, but nothing ever happened to them.
So you had have you got 3 sons? Did
3
I read
sons,
that? Yeah.
Yes.
Did you have all of your children in Thailand, Ali?
No, the children were born, 2 were born in Darwin and 1 in Canberra. And the youngest was 1 year old when we moved to Bangkok. He spent 1 year in Australia and then 4 years in Thailand. And when we moved back to Australia and my mother thought she was putting on a beautiful family traditional roast with the vegetables, and he took one look at it and said, "Where's the rice?" Which
and were the
affronted
children
her.
bilingual by then?
The youngest was very, very good. But the other 2 went to an international school, so they actually came back with lovely English accents because it was an English international school.
Had you been married young when you were in Darwin?
No, I married when I was 25, which I don't think's young, really.
And tell me about living that expat life. What was that like for you? Was that something that you had sort of signed up for?
I didn't know anything about it. I went to Thailand with no knowledge and no expectations because you're pretty busy when you've got 3 little children. There was a small expectation that as expat wives, we had some duties. Each one of us welcomed the new arrivals to make sure that they settled in as I was welcomed and settled in. But then on the other hand, there was a busy and varied social life. You could volunteer at the orphanages or do really whatever you wanted or just live an idle life. I lived a much more sporting life then. I really enjoyed a lot of tennis while I was over there, which was great. And did a few little things charitable. One of my welcomings the wife didn't speak very good English, and she had a son and a Great Dane and had quite a lot of trauma settling in, and I came away from that welcoming, never fully understanding whether it was the child or the dog that had suffered some terrible injury to its private parts in the transition. So I was trying to be very sweet to her, but I didn't know if I was commiserating on the dog's behalf or the child's behalf.
Is that because of the language barrier,
It
you
was.
mean?
I didn't understand
What
her very
country
well.
had she come from?
Well, she was a Thai lady,
Right.
but she'd married, her husband had been based over there a few years previously and married her, and she'd never really learned very good English.
At that stage, were you thinking to yourself, could you see your life out in front of you being sort of an expat's wife and ever going back to work, or?
My life was a jumble. I was very busy. I was being creative. I designed a couple of board games over there and did a lot of writing, but that was little designed small children's books which I just illustrated and read to the kids and then threw away. I don't think any of those survive now. So I was creative and using the computer, typing out short stories and things like that, but no forward thinking, no planning. My life was very much a day-to-day existence, and possibly because my marriage at that stage was not very harmonious, so I probably wasn't making many plans.
You came back and you decided then to go to university. How big a step was that for you? Was that
Absolutely huge.
right?
Absolutely
What year
huge.
would that have been, Ali?
2000 and 2000.
Mm-hmm.
I went to boarding school because there was no high school close to where I grew up, and for some odd reason I never made the connection that when my sister packed her suitcase and went away for a long time, it meant that she was at boarding school. And when I packed my suitcase, I do not know to this day what I thought it meant, but I was bereft when my parents drove away. And I really did develop quite a phobia of institutions. And so I did enrol at the then Mitchell College of Advanced Education in Bathurst to do journalism, and lasted 3 days. I said, no, I'm over it. That was when I was 18. And Dad said to me prophetically, you'll never go back. How right he was. So at the time when I enrolled in New England University, I was deep into crystal healing. So I took my big handful of crystals with me up to the university and I sat them out on the windowsill in my little room, and I survived my first residential school. After that, because I took a girlfriend, there's no way I could have done it on my own. It became easier. I think my husband and the boys just thought it was fabulous. Mum's gone to university for a week. What freedom, what bliss. We can eat chips all week.
Drink beer and eat peanuts for dinner. Yeah, for sure. Wow, well, there's so much in that. I would need to unpack that because you had grown up in the country, right? And that's why you'd gone off to boarding school.
That's correct.
Whereabouts
yes.
in the country had you grown up?
I grew up in beautiful New England at Ben Lomond. I went to Ben Lomond Public School, and we would have had to be in Ben Lomond because we didn't live in the village. We lived out of town. We would have had to be in the village at 7 o'clock every morning to access Glen Innes High School or Guyra, I think. And that just wasn't feasible at that stage because there were still a number of gates on the road. And so even though it put a hell of a dent in the parents' exchequer, we went to boarding school.
I love that expression, a number of gates, because, you know, in the corporate world, they talk about the gates that you have to go through, but you're talking...
I'm talking about physical
gates to open the gates. So what are some of your earliest memories of... your parents were farming, were they?
Yes, Dad he ran sheep and cattle, the sheep for fat lambs and wool and beef cattle, and grew some small crops for feed for the cattle, except one year he decided he was going to grow turnips and sell to the vegetable shops. Well, that didn't work, and we ate turnips until we were all sick of turnips. Yuck. If you ever offered
Can you
me
eat a turnip now?
No,
No,
I can't.
stand the smell of
Absolutely
them.
not. No,
No.
they're gross.
Uh-huh.
But one of my first memories is of being on a horse, being held on a horse by Dad, being on one side of a big fence and looking straight through at the huge face of a bull on the other side of the fence. We used to, when it snowed, see who could be the first one to run out and leave their footprints in the snow, which my mother thought was absolutely crazy. You stupid, stupid children, look at your feet, they're pink.
Where did you come in the family, Ali? Where were
I
your
was
position?
number
You
three.
mentioned you had an older sister.
My big brother, then my sister, then me, and then my youngest brother. There's four of us.
And so everyone had gone off to boarding school. You're
My brother went to boarding school in Brisbane, and then my sister went to Tamworth, and then I went to Tamworth. And then after 4 years of Tamworth, and to my shame, I went home and said to my parents, if you do not want someone expelled from boarding school, you'd better see if there can be other arrangements made. Fortunately, at that time, they had just opened a CWA hostel in Inverell, and that was the time when my youngest brother was about to go to high school. So they decided he could board in Inverell and I could too. That suited me so much better because then I could go home on the weekends. And home was the thing that I used to suffer from dreadful homesickness. And even when we lived in Darwin, I didn't even have to shut my eyes to visualise home. It took me years to get over that. And I can't explain why that happened or what caused it, but certainly the shock of landing at boarding school maybe started it.
Just remind the listeners that you're on Big Little Small Talk, and we're talking to Australian novelist Ali Trimper. So, Ali, you talk about your home. Was there a love of literature in your home? Your mum and dad, were they big readers?
Absolutely, they were. There was no television in the house just because probably they couldn't afford it. Dad was a great reader, and through him, Mum developed a love of reading. My ex-husband said the thing he remembered most about my parents' house was the wall of books in the lounge room. There were books everywhere in the house. I read, and we all read. The long winter nights, we just read anything my sister read, then she passed it to me. I probably did read older. I mean, I don't know many 12-year-olds who have gone through most of Charles Dickens' works by that age. I remember once my sister, in the old days, we used to win book prizes, and my sister won Patrick White's Vivisector. And my father had this talent. Whatever book he picked up, if it had anything in the least bad in it, he had a talent for finding that very page. And when he opened up the Vivisector, it was at some terrible page, and he was beside himself that this could be given as a book prize to one of his daughters.
Was your father the type of fellow who would then go and have a piece of those?
Oh, absolutely. He
He
went
did.
down there and confronted them and said this was an inappropriate book prize, particularly at a girls' school, and he let them know in no uncertain terms that he didn't think very much of it.
So where did the books that your parents were reading, where did they come from? Did they buy them new? Because books are really expensive and always have been, aren't they? Or do you think that they were passed
Books were gifts. And both my parents came from fairly large families, and books were gifts. Books they gave to each other on anniversaries, on birthdays, on Christmas. The families gave each other books, lots of reference books they bought, the ones, what bird is that, and those sorts of books they bought. Paperback novels they often bought or bought second hand. We used the library. But no, books were given as gifts in our family, and if you read any of the fly papers, they always said to so-and-so with love, and that was a gift.
Do you still have a lot of your books from childhood, or the books that you were given as gifts?
No, I don't.
They're a lot to cart around, aren't they?
I've moved too many times. I've moved so many times, and every time I've moved, it's been cull those books, cull those books, cull it. And there's been regrets, you know, in years after. I thought, oh, why did I give away that book? But now I know that you can replace a book, you can buy it again, or else there's another nice book there.
Mm.
You know.
Were your brothers big readers as well?
Boys are not so great readers. Unfortunately, my older brother has passed away, but when I was first published, I made sure everybody in the family had a copy of the book, including my young brother. And I said, you will read this book. He said, you know I don't read. I don't read. I don't. I said, you'll read it. You'll read it.
Mm.
And then I gave him a copy of my second book, and he was travelling to Perth, and he took a photo and sent it up. See, holiday reading, and there was my book on the top. But he's never commented, so I don't know whether he read it or not.
Well, we might make that causal link between wearing the glasses and reading a lot as a kid, just as a professional opinion. Anyway, we'll move on from that. You speak about your father and the type of character he was. Tell me the story about him and how he asked you to write him a letter.
My marriage. If you really want to break up your marriage, don't do it when you're living in Australia. Do it when there's nobody around who can come and badger you with tears and cups of tea and stuff. Do it where there's nobody, because my marriage did break down in Thailand. I rang my parents and I said, I've moved from my marriage, and Dad said, you better tell me. I can't understand what's going on. You'd better tell me. So I bought a foolscap notepad and I started writing. And 12 pages later, I stopped writing. I didn't reread it. I folded it up and I put it in the mail. And however long it took that letter to get from Bangkok to Australia, Dad rang me in tears and he said, I've got 2 questions. Oh, what are they, Dad? Where did you learn to write like that? And how did this happen?
I was going to ask about the second.
Yeah.
Because you talk about that being sort of almost a pivotal, am I right in saying that that was where you started to think about writing?
Well, then he and I then started discussing writing. I realised then that he liked writing too. And then not so very many years after that, he retired and he did a writing course. And so we talked a lot about what he wrote, and he wrote 2 books and published 2 books of anecdotes of his life, which are riotous reading.
Are they good, are they? Or they're not just a dad joke, one after the other?
They're just his funny life anecdotes and the way he wrote them. And when, after they'd both died, we took their ashes back to the family farm to spread them on the airstrip there, my son said, Mum, I want to read, remember Grandfather's story about the airstrip? I want to read that. And he did read it, and it just seemed very appropriate because it was how my father had initially showed this paddock to his friend and said, I'm going to put an airstrip there for spreading superphosphate. And his friend had looked at the rocks and gone, are you just? And Dad, in any spare time, had just been clearing. And finally he had it in really, because he was a meticulous man, he'd cleared off all the rocks and this airstrip was lovely and smooth, but very well grassed. And he said to his friend, come, I'll take you for a drive up the airstrip. And being the devil he was, put his foot down and went flat out up the airstrip. His friend was white by the time because all he could remember was all the rocks and he was waiting for the collision. So when they stopped the vehicle, he said, you have done a lot of work, haven't you?
Was there anything that you learnt from those books about your father that you hadn't known or saw him in a different light or?
No, because Dad was just, he was like everybody in our family, just a storyteller. Just what you saw was what you got. We were, all of us, very harmonious, all very chit-chatty, family stories, tell it, do it. He enjoyed telling a story. He had a flair for the humour. I'm not quite sure I have that flair, but anyway, maybe because his first book of anecdotes was his childhood, there were things in that we didn't know, but they weren't harsh things. They were just escapades, riding a bicycle. The train stopped at Fallon, and he went to boarding school in here, and they had went on the train, got their bicycle off the train and rode however far it was to the family property, which was, the address was St George, so must have been a fair way
Oh,
from
I thought you were
Fallon.
saying that they rode from Fallon to Toowoomba. I thought that's a
No,
pretty good effort.
no, but I thought that was a fair way. I'm not very clear on the geography out
Yes,
there,
yeah.
but even so.
So let's talk about your books then, because that's why we're here. Now you're just about to publish your third novel, is that correct?
Yes.
Your first one was called Divine Hayfields.
Yes, it was about a matriarch who owned a horse stud, and she was probably modelled a little bit after me, bombastic and bossy. And it got too much for somebody. So that story is about the police searching for the murderer who killed her. And I was quite pleased with the way that book worked out. However, I heard from two separate sources, unprompted, that the second book is better.
Does the second book follow on from the first? The second book's called Search for Elise, is that right?
Yes, the second
Yeah.
book has the same, all three books have the same detectives. And it's all set in the same area around Muswellbrook in New South Wales. The same detectives and some similar fringe characters, but that is not really a follow on. The victims are all individuals.
You know how every interview you hear with a novelist, people say, is that really you, or are they based on people that you know? Like, you seem to say quite definitively that the first one was based on you, is that right?
Well, not a lot of her characteristics are my characteristics.
And someone wanted to get rid of her.
I would hope that nobody gets rid of me. But no, nobody else. A lot of people who read Divine Hayfield said, "Oh, I recognise this, and this, and this, and that, and that," and it's not true, because unless those similarities came from so far back in my subconscious, then none of it is real. Only a teeny tiny bit of the setting is an image from when I was young, from a place we visited. But that is all that's similar. The village in Divine Hayfields is a figment of my imagination. All the characters. I mean, the good thing about writing fiction is you can make the people just how you want them, as lovely or as horrible as you like. And it's great fun finding names for them. I love naming my people.
Do you call the tall guy Mr. Pole, or, anything like that? Is nothing that obvious?
I did start that in this Search for Elise, and then I thought, oh, yuck, that's just gross.
That's a bit cringy. I read where you said you had, in terms of making your characters believable, you said, I don't know many people who want to enjoy or do enjoy reading about saintly goody two-shoes. So,
I honestly don't like reading about people who are too good. So I like all of my characters to have some flaws. And there was a daughter in Divine Hayfields, but I couldn't have her as a good and dutiful daughter. She had to be the type who sneaked out the window after dark, sort of thing,
Perhaps the type who said to their parents, if you don't find me a boarding house, there might be an expulsion on your...
Some of my rebellion coming through.
It could be that too. And you also said, which I thought was really prophetic, you said, I more or less rely on readers' experiences to colour their interpretation of the relationships depicted in the story. And I love that, because reading is such a personal thing, isn't it? You're picturing what they look like in some ways, or the way that they speak.
Yes, because if you and I read the same book, you would come away with a totally different set of images in your head than I would have in my head, despite the fact that we both read exactly the same words. And so nobody is going to have the same experience through reading the same book. I realised that even more firmly from Search for Elise, because some of the things depicted in that are quite acceptable to me as a country person, manageable, not too dramatic, and yet some passages from that were described to me by a city person as breathtaking.
No, isn't that interesting? So is this to do with slaughter of animals or something like
No,
that, you mean? No?
no, this is to do with what Elise was going through,
Oh,
without giving away too much of the story,
yeah.
because we are, after all, searching for Elise in the
Okay.
book.
Exactly. Well, I always like to bring this up with country people, particularly that the statistics around the CEOs of ASX listed companies, they're 21%. So they're overrepresented. And they say it's because country people have resilience, propensity to work and to travel, and the ability to speak to people on all levels of society. Do you think that that's sort of true of you too, Ali?
I do think that's true. And I wondered, I actually never thought about it from the point of view of background. I tended to think about that from the point of view of age. I certainly think people from my age group have much more resilience than possibly a lot of younger people. But I do know that rural people are very resilient and very much able to turn a bad situation around through their own resilience, creativity, and ability to think on the spot. Because if you can't think on the spot, then you can't get yourself out of that spot. Whereas in the city, if something goes wrong, you can ring a taxi, or, you've got so many more things at your fingertips in the city than you have out in the country.
It's interesting, isn't it? Just to remind the listeners that they're on 102.7 FM. I'm Megan O'Hara Sullivan, and we're on Big Little Small Talk. And we're talking to the Australian novelist, Ali Trimper. Trimper. I get that
Terribly
right?
hard name.
Trimper. So, the genre of your books, are they murder mysteries? Is that what we
Yes,
say?
murder mysteries.
And you loved murder mysteries as a reader yourself?
I did, and we read as a family. I think we all read a lot of Agatha Christie back in the day. Ngaio Marsh and Dorothy Sayre wrote murder mysteries, and my sister would finish the book and slap it down on the table. Well, I guessed that one, all right, and I would read it and think, I must figure it out. And I never did. But I read for the enjoyment of burying myself in it.
Escaping to somewhere else.
Exactly.
Yeah. And what makes a good murder mystery, do you think?
One that drags you in, one that gets you thinking, one that maybe polarizes you. I don't know if my books polarize you or just drag you in, or
When you say polarize, Ali, what do you mean? That
well, you either love the characters or you hate the characters, or you wish it's this one because you think this one's really, really bad and they deserve something bad to happen to them, and then you're disappointed because they're not the killer after all, and you think, oh, gee whiz, what a shame.
So is it too difficult a question to say, why do you write it? Why do you write like that in that genre?
I just love writing. I mean, when I start a book, I just write a tiny description. When you write a novel, you're supposed to write a précis of the whole thing, and then you're supposed to write a précis of each chapter. And I've never done that. I did not know how Search for Elise was going to end until I was about 5 pages from the end. I didn't know how Elise was going to end until fairly close to the end. I don't know. And if things happen in my writing and I have to either introduce somebody, or a new idea crops up, or I have to cut somebody out, then it might mean I have to go back and rejig certain bits. But that's just part of how it grows from my mind. When you're making a cake, you can't do that. When you're knitting a jumper, you can't do that. So when you're writing a book, to have that freedom to jump about and change things at will, well, what more could you want? It's blissful.
Has your writing evolved in any way?
Um,
Are you getting maybe quicker or more sophisticated or more sort of nuanced, I guess?
Possibly would not say more sophisticated, but I would say quicker. I don't want, I'm never going to be one of these I'm not an intellectual writer. I'm just writing for enjoyment. And I hope people are reading for enjoyment, not for intellectual stimulation. There's plenty of intellectual people out there who can write highfalutin stuff that other highfalutin people will enjoy. But I just think, this is a bit of simple escapism that people can simply escape to.
Mm.
I'm not sure if there are any more stories, but if there are, fine. If there's not, stiff.
So we're on to, what's the latest title of your third novel now?
An Unstylish Death.
An Unstylish Death.
Yes.
And tell me, it's going to be launched fairly soon on the 18th of October. Whereabouts?
No, that's this one.
Oh, okay. Well, run me through the launchings of what's happening.
The launching is because the cuckoo clock shop out at Kabbalah that had all those cuckoo clocks.
The Black Forest Hill Cuckoo Clock Shop.
Thank you for the proper name. That's nice to know. I heard that they were going to turn it into a brew house. And because I launched Search for Elise at Monty's Brew House in Highfields, I thought, oh, well, we'll just do another one and that will be there. And then they ran against a few problems and their opening was put back. And I had boxes of Search for Elise, so they've been sold here and there, but I've never really launched it. And finally, I went for lunch at the cafe there at Kabbalah, and I said, when are you opening? And she said, oh, on the 18th of October. And I said, great, I'll launch my book on the 19th. And she said, great. So Search for Elise will be launched at the Clock and Bull Brew House at Kabbalah at 3:30 on the 19th. And it'll be a great opportunity for people to experience a brand new venue and buy a book, a signed book.
A signed book, one that you can keep in your bookshelf forever. So that's just open to the general public, Ali. You can come along. And will you be speaking about the book and giving it at 3:30 on the 19th of October at the Clock and Bull Brew House? Sounds wonderful. Okay, Ali Trimper, novelist. We'll get back to your books. They sometimes say that books transplant you somewhere and that's the reason why people read. What do people eat in your novels?
One of my characters is an Italian lady. So in that house, they eat a lot of Italian food. A lovely man who has read both my first books said they're stopping for too much coffee. So they're always having a coffee, obviously. But they don't they don't sit down to meals very much. They don't have time. They're busy police people catching baddies.
That's what they're doing. Do you have any favourite lines from your latest novels?
In this one, because you're really not allowed to lose your temper much in regular life. You get very much censured if you lose control. So in the second story flat across town, two brothers faced each other, one furious, the other defensive. You did bloody what? Hadley yelled at Tobias. A vein stood out in his forehead and he lunged for his brother. Tobias stepped back nimbly, eyes wide. He'd never seen his brother lose it like this. I mean, you can make somebody really lose it and not have everybody in the neighbourhood going, are they fighting in that house? So I really quite liked that. There was also another line which says, for two women who were forced into a degree of submissiveness by their strong husbands, who knew very little of their respective family businesses, who strongly fit the mould of quiet homemaker, both Rhea and Cleo seem to have some surprising strength.
Well, I think that says something about the novelist. Would you agree?
Yes, I've never normally acknowledge my strength, but I think I probably am a strong woman. On the other hand, you can't be an island. I'm sure I would never have got this far without the absolutely unwavering support of my husband, who is not a man of flowery language. He simply says, what's stopping you from doing it?
It's that unwavering belief. You know, with the power of social media, Ali, you can go through people's profile on LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook and look at the things that they have liked over the years. And one of the things that you liked was a quote that said, "To build a strong team, you must see someone else's strengths as a complement to your weakness, not a threat to your position or authority." Does that sound like something that resonates with you?
Definitely, because you need to, if you're threatened, then half of you is already shut down. If you see somebody else who is strong, then ideally you can see that if you team up, you're going to be twice as strong. But if you see somebody who's working beside you as a threat, then this half of you is concentrating so much on them being a threat that you've shut down half of your whatever strength you really should be using for the joint project. You can't shut yourself down and dream up competition when the competition should be seen as, let's just do it hand in hand.
Well, another thing that I saw that you'd liked was something I had reshared on social media once, and it said, "She's a lot. You're right. I am a lot of woman with a lot of layers, a lot of personality, a lot of dreams, a lot of ideas, a lot of strategies, and a lot of emotions, and a lot of love. Yeah, you're right. I am a lot." Do you think you're a lot? Have you ever been called a lot?
Yeah, I've been called a lot, but I've also come to realise in recent years you have to take medication for different things, and one of my medications means I can't drink alcohol anymore. I think I'm really a lot when I'm drinking alcohol, but now that I'm not drinking alcohol, I'm a much more measured person. I don't say I've lost my sense of humour or my sense of fun, but certainly the drama queen is folded up and she's put away in the bottom drawer. But definitely I have, and I think my ex-husband would agree, yes, she's a lot.
Said in not the nicest way either. Do you miss not drinking? Do you miss the release or the...
It's like cigarettes. I gave up smoking cigarettes in the 90s and I could not break that habit of holding my hand up with the two fingers. And it's the same with the drinking. It's the holding a glass. And so when my husband has a whiskey in the evenings, I don't think, oh, Lordy Moses, I would love to have a whiskey. I just have a ginger beer or a lemon squash. And so long as I've got the glass and we clink our glasses and say cheers, then I can sip my ginger beer or my lemon squash at the same pace as him, and that's fine. But I certainly, no, I don't miss alcohol, which is quite surprising because I think, probably a therapist would say I have abused it.
It's all part of the same thing, isn't it? A bit of the rebellion and all of that.
Probably,
at what point is it too much? Ellie, tell me about how hard it is to promote yourself when you're a novelist and how important it is.
Well,
and how does it sit with you?
I am not. Look, I can write till the cows come home. I really, really can. But I am not very good at self-promotion. I know some American people, and most of the American people I know are tremendously good at self-promotion, who confidently go out, sell themselves without even a blush. But for me, to put myself out there, it almost feels immodest. To tell you the honest truth, I wrote an article promoting myself and my book and sent it off to the Highfields Herald and one to the Chronicle, and I, with an email saying, I hope you publish this because it's about launching my book. And the Highfields Herald published it in its entirety without changing a word. I've never heard from the Chronicle, so I don't know what they've done. Once I've sent it, well, that's it. I don't look back. That's done. I can't sit there and go, oh, I wish I hadn't done that, because it's done. It's not easy to do. I'm really not good at pushing myself out there on other people.
And I mean, you can completely understand. I think mostly creative people, that's not their long suit, is it? But entering yourself in awards and things and making contact with people, how else do you get the word out there, I suppose?
Well, how else do you? And I must say, my publishers, Siddhartha, Kerry, is fabulous. He doesn't just do this for me. He does this for all of his authors. And he lets us know when all of the awards are coming up, the Ned Kellys, the New South Wales Writers Awards, the South Australian, Melbourne, Queensland. And if we're eligible, we're encouraged, because who does not want that fabulous little round sticker on the front of their book saying,
Miles Franklin Award.
Yes, well, those things, but I'm pretty sure I would never get one, but it's fabulous to try.
What are you sort of enjoying about the process that has come out of left field?
Well, I don't know. It's just nice to hear. I mean, that lady, I put it on the Facebook page that I was having this launch, and a lady who I don't know, but who I will bless forever, wrote on it, I have read this book and I've read the other one and I think this one's better. And I just love that she enjoyed it. And I love hearing that people, enjoyed the book.
Oh, that positive affirmation. It's addictive.
It's all you want,
For sure.
So I had one person bought a book to go on their cruise, came back from the cruise and said, I loved it. I want another book for my next cruise. Fortunately, that happened. And they took Elise on the cruise. I want another book for my next cruise. I loved it. Well, it's like the difference between turning out a good batch of scones and a bunch of rocks. People are going to politely say, oh, that's a lovely little rock. But when they say they like your book, they don't need to say it.
They don't
unless
have
they
to,
mean
correct, yeah. So what are you reading at the moment? What's the last good book you've read?
Oh, I read The Tea Ladies by Amanda Hampson, and I loved those ladies. They were crime solvers as well, but one of them smoked a pipe. Oh, she was rough, but they were very clever ladies, and each one of them a great individual. And the next, what I have to get on to is, who's that great big tall English chap?
Oh, and he's written the murder mysteries as well. He's just released another one. I did read that first one.
Hold of those.
Yeah, they're all being made into a TV series and things like that
Oh,
now.
how exciting.
Yeah, I can't think of his name either. What about the things that make you feel unstoppable? What's made you feel unstoppable lately?
Probably the only thing that makes me feel unstoppable is about 800 kilos of bull chasing behind me.
Like that one that you were looking through the fence at, perhaps?
I think he was so huge because I was only about 3, probably. I'm usually a fairly positive person. If I do have moments of self-doubt, it only takes, because my husband's very Germanic, very pragmatic, and he says it can be done, so it can be done. He says you can do it, so I can do it. So if he doesn't question me, then I am unstoppable. If I have that brick wall of my husband behind me, I'm fine.
Well, hopefully you can do it without the brick wall of your husband behind you.
Yes,
because it's in here, in your head. Yeah. What about your life's biggest regret, Ali? Anything?
I don't look back, because why would you? You can't spend time rolling in regret. It's happened. You've hopefully learned from it. You've hopefully changed what you could about it and moved on. I mean, I couldn't say I regret my first marriage, because from that first marriage came my 3 utterly gorgeous sons, and the whole marriage wasn't totally miserable. We talk about our first marriage and say, oh, it ended, and we give the impression that the whole marriage was a disaster, but I don't really think there are many marriages that are total disasters forever. So maybe it might nearly be too late for me to walk the Comenos Trail.
I don't know about that. All that good hard athletics and tennis that you put in when you were, I think there's people older than you walking the Camino.
Well,
definitely.
Not sure my husband could keep up though. He's a little bit older.
Well, he sounds like the type of guy that might be cracking the whip anyway. What made you smile today?
Oh, anytime I want to smile, I just look through the photos on my phone at those ratty, gorgeous grandchildren. Oh, they're crazy. I have one who's just proudly holding up her L plates, right down to the tiny little one with the big eyes. Oh, they're all gorgeous. They're lovely.
You're writing any children's books for them?
No.
No, haven't got time.
No, well, to be honest, I don't think I need to, because there are a million beautiful, clever, stylish, colourful, educative books available for children now. The choice of books for children nowadays is phenomenal, and they're quality books too.
Is that something that you share with the grandchildren? Do you read to them a lot?
Absolutely. I love reading with them. They love books. I sometimes wonder if they look at their gifts and go, oh God, another book from Granny.
They won't. I can guarantee they will not, as long as they keep them and you've inscribed something in the front of them.
Yes, no, we all love reading with each other, and the fact that even the two little preschoolers will come and read to me. And when Dad was dying and Mum needed to have a little lie down, my granddaughter and grandson knew something was up, but they didn't know quite what. And they knew Granny needed a bit of comfort, so they did the only thing that they could. They went and read to Granny, and I don't think they even knew the words, but they read to Granny. And so reading is huge in all of our family.
What a beautiful story. That is just amazing to think, yes, and you can see these little children making up a story, not being able to read the words, but they somehow could feel that intuitively that was something that you needed. How beautiful. I don't know, is it my imagination, or is there some sort of English heritage for you?
No.
No.
Oh, well, way back.
Okay.
I think we came out from somewhere, maybe.
I thought you were going to say Ireland, with the love of the storytelling and the love of the humour. Okay, well, where I'm going to with this question, Ali, is do you have a favourite royal?
Oh, favourite royal? Ooh, Queen Victoria, because she was so strong, such a tiny little woman. The things that she had to put up with from such a young age. Goodness me. And overlaying her with my rebelliousness at that age, me, big, tall, lanky, stride out there, Australian, nonconformist, and her, tiny little miniature, short steps, very cosseted and wrapped around in lace and obedient. My goodness me, she would have had to be a terribly strong woman not to have just completely exploded. All those constraints. Goodness.
I think that's the first Queen Victoria we've had. I love it. So fitting, so beautiful. Okay, my last question is, what's the song that can't keep you off the dance floor, Ali?
Anything with just a lot of beat in it. We lived in a shed for a while when we were farming tea tree, and I used to dance around the shed with Lou Bega playing. You could hear him from the creek.
Lou Bega, is it?
Yeah.
Is there a particular song of blues that you like?
It's not blues. It's Lou Bega. A little bit of Monica. Remember that
I can
song?
hear that song, yes, in my head. Okay, we'll see if we can find a little bit of that to put on.
Oh,
Look,
nice.
it's just been lovely hearing your story, and particularly lovely to think that you came at writing successfully a little bit later in your life. And I'm hoping to get to the launch on the 19th at the Clock and Bull Brew House at Kabbalah at 3:30.
3:30.
Wonderful.
That would be fantastic.
Ali Trimper, thank you so much for being my guest today on Big Little Small Talk.
Thank you very much, Megan. Thank you very much.
That's it for this week. Thanks for joining me on Big Little Small Talk. I hope you can make the time to join me next week. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on your favourite podcast app.